Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a second and picture a king.
Yeah.
But not the standard oil painting version, the guy sitting stiffly on a throne, holding a scepter, looking kind of bored.
Right.
I want you to picture a monarch who is so overwhelmed with joy, so completely beside himself that he strips off his royal robes, puts on a simple linen apron, and just dances with absolute abandon in the middle of a street.
It's a scene that, let's be honest, would probably get a modern leader impeached, or at least trending for all the wrong reasons. It's undignified in the best possible way.
Oh, absolutely. It's scandalous. But then I'm going to do a hard cut to a totally different scene. Fast forward 1,000 years or so. We're in a crowded house. The air is thick, stifling,
Tense.
so tense. You have a family standing outside, desperate to get in, and a man inside who is calmly but radically redrawing the lines of who actually belongs to him.
It's a massive contrast. You've got this huge public festival on one hand and a very awkward family moment on the other.
And that is exactly where we're diving in today. We're looking at the source material for Tuesday of the third week in Ordinary Time, specifically January 27, 2026.
Yeah.
We've got readings from 2 Samuel 6, that's the King David story, Psalm 24, and a really complex scene from Mark chapter 3.
And our mission today is to find the connecting thread between these two very different vibes. We're really exploring the whole concept of belonging.
Right. Because on the surface, dancing in the street and sitting in a circle don't seem related at all. But our sources argue they are both about how you become an insider with God. We also have a reflection piece, Kinship Through the Will of God, that'll help us tie it all together.
Okay, so let's start with the party, the spectacle. 2 Samuel 6.
This is a huge turning point for Israel. David is king, he's taken Jerusalem, and now he's bringing the Ark of God into the city of David.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, this isn't just a gold box like in the movies.
No, not at all. It's the hot zone. It is the localized, terrifyingly holy presence of God. You do not mess around with this thing.
Correct. So it isn't like, calling the movers. It's a massive theological and political power move.
He's bringing God's presence right into the center of the nation's life.
And the text gives us this incredible detail. I think most people just skim right over it. It says, as soon as the bearers of the Ark of the Lord had advanced 6 steps, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling.
6 steps?
Yeah.
Just stop and think about the pacing of that for a moment.
It's agonizingly slow. Imagine trying to get across town, but every 20 feet you have to stop and have a massive barbecue.
It's so deliberate. It emphasizes the sheer gravity of the occasion. You don't just, casually wheel the presence of God into town on a cart, which, by the way, they tried earlier and it went horribly wrong.
Oh, right. Someone died.
Someone died. So this time there's this mix of terror and reverence. Every 6 steps is an acknowledgement that this is dangerous and holy.
And an ox and a fatling. That's not cheap. That's high-value livestock. The road to Jerusalem is basically paved with blood and barbecue. It sets a tone of, total commitment.
It does. But then in the middle of all this heavy, solemn ritual, you get David. And his behavior is not what you'd expect.
He is not acting like a king or a general. The text makes a point of his outfit. He was girt with a linen apron.
The linen ephod. And this is fascinating because it's a priestly garment, but it's also really simple. It's basically an undergarment compared to what he could have been wearing. He's stripping down.
It's like the CEO taking off the expensive suit, rolling up his sleeves, and putting on a generic work shirt.
That's a great analogy. He's shedding his status. He isn't appearing before the ark as the commander-in-chief. He's appearing as a servant. He's leveling himself with everyone else.
And he's dancing before the Lord with abandon. I love that word, abandon. He has lost all self-consciousness. He doesn't care who's watching.
It's just uninhibited joy. The text mentions shouts of joy and the sound of the horn. It's a sensory overload. And I think this challenges how we often think about reverence, We equate it with being quiet and somber.
Right, the library voice version of worship.
Yeah, exactly. But here, reverence looks like a massive party. It's loud, it's sweaty, it's public. A full-body experience.
And speaking of a party, let's talk about the catering. This is my favorite detail. They get the ark into the tent, do all the offerings, but then David turns to the crowd.
The distribution. This is a key moment.
He blesses them, and then he gives out food to each man and each woman in the entire multitude of Israel.
And notice the inclusivity there, each man and each woman. In the ancient world, women were often just overlooked in these kinds of public distributions. But here, everyone gets a share.
And the menu is so specific. A loaf of bread, a cut of roast meat, and a raisin cake. Now, bread and meat, I get. But why a raisin cake?
Raisin cakes were a huge delicacy back then. You have to remember, they didn't have refined sugar. Concentrated fruit like that was high energy, sweet, and kind of rare. It was a luxury.
So it's like giving everyone a fancy steak and a really good dessert.
It signifies surplus. The symbolism is that when God is present and the king is obedient, the result is abundance for everyone. Belonging to this kingdom means you get fed and you get the good stuff.
It really paints a picture. But you can't have a procession without a soundtrack. And that brings us to our second source, Psalm 24.
Right. Scholars have linked this psalm to this exact kind of event. It really captures the mood of the crowd.
It is so dramatic. It literally addresses the city gates. Lift up, O gates, your lintels. Reach up, you ancient portals, that the King of glory may come in.
They're basically shouting at the architecture to get bigger. Open wider. Why? Because the king who is entering is too big for the normal-sized doors.
It's like trying to fit a semi-truck into a normal garage. The building has to change. And then there's this call and response part. Someone asks, who is this King of glory?
Which is a good question. Who are we opening the doors for?
And the answer just thunders back. The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle, and then the Lord of hosts.
That phrase, Lord of hosts, we hear it a lot, but we might miss the edge on it. Hosts means armies. Angelic armies, the armies of Israel.
So this is militaristic. It's not the Lord of the gentle breeze.
Very militaristic. It frames the ark's arrival not just as a religious thing, but as the return of a conquering warrior king. This is a God who's taking his throne. It explains why the gates need to get out of the way.
So if we just pause here, the vibe for the first half of our deep dive is loud, public, victorious, generous, raising cakes, horns, dancing kings. Everyone knows who the king is, and everyone is invited to the party.
It's a spectacle of national identity. If you're an Israelite on this day, you belong to the winning team.
Okay, hold that feeling. Hold the raisin cake. Because now we're going to slam on the brakes. We're leaving the loud streets of Jerusalem and jumping 1,000 years to a small house in Galilee.
Yeah.
Mark chapter 3.
And the shift in atmosphere is, well, it's jarring. We go from this huge outdoor space to a cramped, crowded room.
Jesus is inside teaching. But the text actually starts with the people who are not inside. His mother and his brothers arrive. But they're standing outside.
That little spatial detail, standing outside, is doing so much work here. In that culture, your family is everything. They're your insiders by definition. If anyone should have a front row seat, it's your mom.
It's almost shameful that they're on the outside. It implies they can't get in, or maybe they're a bit worried about Jesus and holding back, but they have to send a message in. You can just imagine that game of telephone.
There's this palpable tension. The crowd tells him, your mother and your brothers and your sisters are outside asking for you. Now, in any normal situation, what's the correct response?
You get up, you say, excuse me, everyone, my mom is here, let me go get her. That is just basic decency 101.
Exactly. You honor your parents as one of the big 10 commandments. But Jesus, he doesn't move. Instead, he asks this question that probably just sucked all the air out of the room. Who are my mother and my brothers?
Oof. If I'm in that room, I'm sweating. It sounds so harsh, like he's publicly disowning them.
Yeah. It definitely sounds dismissive, but then he does something visual. The text says he looked around at those seated in the circle.
That phrase, seated in the circle, it stands out. In the David story, everyone was moving, marching. Here, the posture is static.
It's the posture of disciple. You sat at the feet of your rabbi. So these people, fishermen, tax collectors, who knows, they're in the posture of listening. They are focused on him.
And Jesus points to them, this ragtag group, and says, here are my mother and my brothers.
And then comes the big declaration, for whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother.
Okay, let's unpack that. Is he saying biology doesn't matter?
I don't think it's a complete rejection of his family, no. He is, however, engaging in a radical redefinition.
He's expanding the definition of family.
He's saying that the bond of the kingdom, the bond formed by a shared obedience to God, is actually thicker than blood.
That brings us to our reflection piece, kinship through the will of God. I had a line that nailed this. It said, true belonging is rooted not in blood ties alone, but in obedience and faithfulness to the Father.
It's a total disruptor. In that world, your bloodline was everything, your status, your protection. Jesus is saying, no, there is a higher allegiance.
It sort of democratizes family then. In David's time, you got a raisin cake because you were an Israelite. In Jesus's house, you get into the inner circle because of your orientation toward God.
Orientation toward God, that is the key. And surprisingly, that links us right back to David.
How so? Dave is the guy spinning around in an apron. He seems like the opposite of sitting quietly in a circle.
Visually, yes. But look at the motivation. Why was David dancing like that? Why did he look like a fool?
Because he was worshiping. He was doing what he felt God wanted him to do. He was surrendering his dignity.
Exactly. David was doing the will of God through expressive, humble worship. The disciples sitting in the circle were doing the will of God through attentive listening. The action looks different. One's a party, one's a seminar, but the internal posture is identical.
It's obedience. Whether you're shouting at gates to open or sitting on a brick floor, the common thread is aligning yourself with God.
That's the bridge. And this brings us to a beautiful line mentioned in our sources from Psalm 68. God sets the lonely in families.
God sets the lonely in families. Wow. That hits hard, especially today.
It does. And in this context, it takes on a double meaning. God brings the lonely into the literal community like the crowd David fed, where everyone got a share.
But he also brings the spiritually lonely into this new family that Jesus is creating.
Right. If you feel like an outcast or if you just feel like you don't fit in, Jesus says, come inside, sit in the circle. You're my brother now.
But there's a condition, isn't there? You can't just hang out in the back and scroll on your phone.
No, it is not passive. The reflection piece is very clear on this. It says we're invited to live as members of God's family by listening to his word and putting it into practice.
Putting it into practice, that's the key. You have to come in and sit down.
Or, to use the David metaphor, you have to join the procession. You have to take the 6 steps. You have to put on the apron. Belonging requires participation.
I think that image, that contrast between standing outside and seated in the circle is what I'm going to take away from this. The outsiders in Mark 3, even with their blood credentials, were separated from Jesus because they weren't part of that moment of listening.
It's a warning against presumption. You can't just assume intimacy with God because of your background. Intimacy is found in the present tense action of doing God's will.
And it turns the King of Glory from Psalm 24, this mighty, conquering warrior, into a brother.
That is a fascinating connection. The Lord of hosts becomes the brother of the one who obeys. The transcendent God becomes your closest kin. That's the whole arc of the story.
So bringing this down to a practical level for us today, we're not dragging an ark through the streets and we can't physically walk into that house in Galilee. So what's the takeaway?
I think it forces us to check our own definitions of family and belonging. We look for it in statics or politics or our own networks. But these texts suggest that the truest belonging is found in shared purpose.
In shared obedience.
Right. When we align our will with God's, we suddenly find ourselves surrounded by brothers and sisters we didn't even know we had. We find ourselves in that circle.
And it reminds me of the party favor again. David gave out bread and meat and cake. Jesus gives relationship. He gives himself.
And just as David's people had to come out to the procession to get the gift, we have to position ourselves to receive that relationship.
The reflection source ended with a prayer that I think captures this. It asks for help to live each day as a true member of God's family by listening attentively to his word.
Listening attentively, that's the circle in Mark.
And embracing his will with love and humility. That's David in the linen apron.
It's a beautiful synthesis. Humility, joy, listening, obedience. That's the recipe for belonging.
It's funny, we started with 2 scenes that seemed completely incompatible. The wild street party and the tense little house.
But they're the same story. They're both about people realizing the king is here, and the only sane response is to drop everything and get close to him.
Whether that means dancing or sitting.
Whether it means shouting with a horn or listening in silence, the goal is closeness.
So here's the so what for this deep dive. Family, in this context, isn't defined by your last name. It's defined by your willingness to listen and to do. It's defined by where you choose to be, standing outside the door or sitting inside the circle.
And the good news is that the belonging is available to anyone willing to step inside.
I want to leave you with a challenge from our source material. It's a question to do something, it asks. What concrete act of obedience can I do today to live more fully as part of God's family?
That's a great question because it takes it out of the theoretical.
It really does. It forces you to look at your day. Are you standing outside just assuming you're good, or are you seated in the circle? Maybe your act of obedience is a kind word to someone. Maybe it's 5 minutes of silence to actually listen, or maybe, who knows, maybe it's buying a raisin cake just to celebrate that you're invited to the party.
Or dancing with abandon. Just maybe check the dress code at work first.
Good advice. Skip the linen apron at the office, unless you want to chat with HR. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you on the next deep dive.